Okay, so it is past 11:30, so I think we can start our meeting. First, I would like to thank our guest speaker, Professor Roman Soucek, a visiting professor from the Medical School Hamburg in Germany, for being here with us today. I would like to welcome everyone present at today's meeting, academics, students, members of our academic community, and those interested in organizational psychology. Today, as a part of our global psychology meetings organized by the Institute of Psychology, we are delighted to welcome Professor Roman Soucek. He is a full professor of work and organizational psychology at the Department of Psychology, Medical School Hamburg in Germany. His research interests include resilience in the work context, work intensity, human resource development, and the evaluation of training interventions. He is also an experienced freelance trainer, particularly interested in bridging the gap between science and practice. Professor Roman Soucek's speech will be followed by a Q&A session, so if you would like to ask questions related to the presented issues, please raise your hand on Teams or write your question in the chat. In English or Polish, I will translate your questions. And without further ado, I invite you to listen to this lecture on resilience in the workplace.
Okay, so thanks a lot for the introduction. You can also just interrupt me because hopefully I'm not seeing all the hands raised. Yeah, so I'm just looking on my screen here. Okay, so welcome to my speech. So I'm going to speak about resilience in the workplace. And this is based on a research project we had at the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, yeah, and we also developed different instruments and also interventions in order to enhance resilience in the workplace. So I'm going to present you the results on that and the concepts we just developed. So as the project just started, yeah, I was just going to the library, to the bookstore, and I found different books like Resilience at Work. Okay, so I know it could be relevant for the workplace and the work context. I found something like about growing resilience. So we should also be able just to increase resilience of persons. I found something about resilience, the science of mastering life's greatest challenges. So it's also something magic and important in there. And I also found something like resilience, adapt and plan for the new abnormal. So I think it would also just fit quite well into our times, yeah, and what we are happening. But what is resilience? As we just start with, we can just describe resilience as the ability of a person just to recover quickly from stressful events, yeah, and also just ensuring psychological well-being that way. But as we're just talking about resilience, you always have a metaphor of a person being like a rock in the shore, so being very resilient and tough and having no problems with anything, yeah. So being a very stable person. But in my opinion, this isn't a very good metaphor for resilience, yeah. It's more a metaphor for resistance, yeah. But I think resilience is about something else. So if I'd like to talk about resilience, I would just use the metaphor of a bamboo. So as the storm just gets over the forest, so the bamboo is just bended and pressed to the ground, but it doesn't break. Yeah. So in the end, as the storm just ends, it just raises up and starts growing again, or just growing further in the air. So I think this ability just to not breaking because of problematic situations is more a metaphor for resilience than this metaphor of being hard and resistant like a rock in the shore. But as resilience is just described like that, but how does resilience just protect our mental health and psychological well-being? So if you just imagine, as you encounter a kind of stressful event, yeah, So just encountering this event will just increase your stress level. Yeah, so it's going up. You get physiologically activated, and after that you just have time to recover from that. But what does happen if we have very frequent events of stressors just showing up? Yeah, so something like this. And so you also get stressed again, but in between, as you have no time to recover, your stress level can just increase, and maybe you just become chronically stressed and burnt out in a way. So how does resilience play a role in this constellation? So I just described of a person that is resilient. It does not mean it just resists to everything, but the person also just perceives a stressful event as stressful, yeah. But resilience is the ability to recover more quickly. So a resilient person, it would be like this. It also gets stressed, but in between it recovers more quickly. So before the next stressors and event just occurs, yeah, I'm having my resources filled up, and I'm having all my capabilities just to cope with the stressors again. So in my opinion, this is why the mechanism how resilience is just protecting our psychological well-being by having this ability to recover more quickly from stressful events. I was talking now about resilience as just having recovered. So was talking about the result, the outcome of resilience. So it's only one perspective. But in designing interventions, it's not very helpful because we can only retrospectively say this person has survived, the other person hasn't survived. So this person was resilient, the other wasn't, yeah. But now the person isn't here anymore. So I think we just need another perspective and also conceptualization of resilience. So as we are talking about resilience, we're also talking about personal resources and are talking of resilience of a trait-like personal resource. But there's also a problem because as we're just talking about resources, these resources are independent from specific situations. But resilience is more about coping with specific situations and mastering these situations. So there still is a gap in between, and we're just going to talk about also resilient as specific coping behavior, because you just have to show this behavior in order to cope with that situation. Yeah. So here we have a kind of different conceptualizations of resilience, of being a resource, of being coping behavior, and also leading to the result of recovering from problematic situations. And if you're going to design interventions, we can just have here different starting points for these interventions. Okay, so I think we can just start with resilience as a personal resource. And by the beginning of our research project, we just didn't want to invent everything new and just to define resilience as being a new trait the world hasn't seen so far, yeah. But we just had the perception of resilience being a bundle of personal resources, of existing constructs that are just assisting us with coping with problematic situations. So in the beginning, we had this idea of mindfulness, self-efficacy, and optimism being very important personal resources that would be a kind of bundle of traits that are suitable for coping with different situations. So I think you know these constructs. So mindfulness is about being in the very present moment and also just perceiving the things that happened around you and also that happened in you, but without evaluating them. Yeah. So This is the core definition of mindfulness, so just perceiving without an automatic evaluation of these things. And I'm having here an example of a person going for a walk with his or her dog. And what do you think in this situation, who is more mindful? I think you see the dog, he's just perceiving the situation as it is. He's just seeing the 4 trees and it's sunny. The person, on the other hand, just doesn't see the trees. He's just thinking about maybe problems at work or at home. Yeah. So in my opinion, in this case, the dog would be just more mindful in this case. But what do you think? What does happen if you're having a dog? What does happen to your dog if an event like this just occurs? Yeah. So what do you think? How would a mindful dog just react? You can say the dog just says, a cat, point. Yeah. And nothing else happens. But the dog can also just chase the cat and just run after it. But wouldn't the dog also be mindful in that moment? Because nothing else counts. It's only cat, 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 yeah? And he's also in the very present moment, yeah? But mindfulness is not about how you just react, yeah? But not reacting automatically. So mindfulness is creating a kind of gap where you can just decide how you react. So he can just perceive the situation as it is, perceive as a cat, but he also can chase a cat. So, so mindfulness just in the end leads to a better self-regulation, yeah. And we also designed different interventions and exercises in order to increase mindfulness. So we had some breathing exercises developed, yeah. And we also did some research on these exercises in whether they're effective or not. So we had some mindfulness breathing exercise and just sent it to people. And this experimental group, it's these squares here, had 5 days in a row did a mindfulness breathing exercise. And we also had a control condition. They also got some exercise, but they were just hearing fairy tales, yeah. And so we just had a pre-test and post-test of mindfulness and see that especially in the experimental condition, mindfulness increased significantly. So we were just collecting these more exercises and just were testing their effectiveness, whether they worked or not. Okay, we also did some thing on self-efficacy. So this is about a kind of perception of you having the competencies just to reach your goal. So this guy here is also, I think, very confident. He can just hold the tree apart from them. So self-efficacy is about a kind of, yes, I can. I'm able just to climb that mountain and get up there. And also a kind of belief in your competencies. We're also having different starting points just to increase self-efficacy. So just thinking about your past success, also about body postures. So we are just designing a kind of illustrative examples, like this one here, of just having an idea of what body postures are about. So in this case, you have a kind of very compressed body posture, yeah. And this is contrasted to a more neutral body posture, as you can just see it down here. And these were just illustrating examples of illustrating research. And it was also a meta-analysis on body postures with a neutral position compared to a more compressed condition would have benefits concerning self-efficacy. Okay, so we also had some exercises on optimism. And, optimism is a kind of believing in the success, even under unfavorable circumstances. But it's also a kind of realistic beliefs. So we're not talking about wishful thinking. Yeah, it would be nice if I had a wish and could just decide what to do. And we're also not talking about a kind of defensive optimism. Yeah. So, like, I don't have to wear a helmet. So on my bike ride, I'm not going to fall down. Okay, and we also developed very, I think, simple exercises. So if you imagine, if you just return from work, what are you going to talk your partner about? Are you going to report the positive things or more the negative things that happened at your working day? So maybe mostly I think you're just reporting about these negative things. Yeah. So we had a very easy exercises in order just to promote a more appreciation of positive events, like this exercise we called it lucky coins, yeah, or a kind of happiness diary. So in the morning you could just take 3 coins and put them into your left pocket, and every time you encounter a positive event, it could be a kind of nice talk with a colleague, you just take 1 coin and put it into the right pocket. And by the end of the working day, you just look again at your coins and just remember yourself on what were these positive events on this working day. So it's a very simple exercise just to get more appreciation to these positive events and just to foster your optimism. Okay, so I was just talking about different personal resources that could be bundled together to resilience. And but in the end, we can just say if a person has these resources, the person is happy. Yeah. If a person has not these resources, maybe it's going to be a hard day for them. Yeah. So it's also not very nice to talk only about resources, but we'll also have to talk about behavior. So as I just introduced to you, we also have this perception or conceptualization of resilience as a behavior, but what does it mean? Just let me explain it to you. You see here a dog, again a dog, yeah? So the dog has a job, just to guard the sheep. And the dog could have very good resources, like being smart and strong. But as you look, I think the sheep are just looking a little bit suspicious, don't they? So I think that the sheep are just planning something, and in fact, they're just running away. But now what's the job of the dog? The dog can just be strong and smart and just stay sitting there. Yeah, so these resources alone won't help the dog to get the sheep back. Instead, the dog just has to start running after the sheep, just to bark and just to get them back to the yard. Yeah. So, but it's not the resources of being smart and things, but it's his behavior that just gets the sheep back. I'm not saying that the resources are not important. A stupid dog maybe would just run in the opposite direction, yeah. But so also the resource being smart just helps him a bit with his behavior, but he has to show that behavior. So as I'm going to talk, it's like a very similar case. So we have a perception of resilience as a resource, leading to resilient behavior, facilitating resilient behavior. And in fact, this resilient behavior is the actual coping that just protects our psychological well-being. We also have some empirical results on this with employees. So we see that these personal resources of self-efficacy, mindfulness, and optimism are positively related to resilient behavior. And on the other hand, we also see that resilient behavior is related to several aspects of psychological well-being, and being associated with a lower extent of emotional exhaustion, with more psychological detachment, and also work engagement. We also have further results, and now we're just looking on cognitive and emotional irritation. So cognitive irritation is about a kind of rumination because of problems you had at work, yeah. And emotional irritation is also of being, I think, a kind of angry or upset because of problems at work. So what you see here are the percentages of variance explained by demographic variables. So it's about 20%. Another 20% would be explained of personal resources with regard to emotional irritation, and resilient behavior adds an additional 10% of variance explained in both constructs. So these percentages are also significant, so it's important to distinguish between personal resources and also resilient behavior that just adds to psychological well-being. So I was just talking about this resilient behavior as a very common thing, but I didn't explain what it is. Yeah. So we were just making some research on it, and research is, let me explain. I'm having a kind of bucket out of leather in my office, and in that bucket I'm just throwing different bones, just rabbit, cats, meerkats, and so on. And so I'm just shaking this and just throwing the bones onto the floor, and there I see a pattern out of bones. And I'm going to interpret this pattern. So this is how research works in our case. But we're also doing some statistical stuff, but I won't show you the boring things, yeah. But the pattern I saw, it's a kind of cluster of 4 distinct facets of resilient behavior. And it's more about a kind of emotional coping. So being able just to master your own affective reactions. I saw another cluster about a positive reinterpretation. So it's a kind of perceiving a situation more as a challenge than a threat. Yeah. And it's more about a kind of comprehensive planning. So having a wide view on what are the possibilities, how to cope with a situation. But you also have to get focused in some point and just keep and stick with goals driving and not getting distracted for it. So these are, I think, 4 different facets of resilient behavior that we just identified. And so we're just, and I'm just returning to this in a bit. Okay. So now I just presented you different, I think, conceptualizations of resilient behavior, and we also developed interventions. So first we started with enhancing personal resources of resilience. And I already just introduced you with personal resources of mindfulness, self-efficacy, and optimism, and also the small exercises I presented you in before. We put all the exercises together in a web-based training. Yeah, and we had 3 courses in this web-based training and had about 5 modules for each course. And this was about, the themes were like focusing attention, or just recollecting one strength, or just communication. It was about communication and positive perspective. And each of this module was just about 5 to 7 minutes, yeah, just consisting of one of these exercises. Also, the lucky coins were one of these exercises. So it's a kind of collection of micro interventions, I would call it like that. Okay, so this is how the training looked like. We were also working with horses, or metaphors of horses. If they just get afraid, it's hard to get them back. Yeah, we also had some breathing exercises in there, and also had a kind of interactive elements, like you have your different options for a dialogue and just can try out and just get a reaction from the person in this online exercise. Okay. So we were also evaluating the effectiveness of this web-based training. And so the first question was, are we able just to increase these personal resources of resilience with such a kind of small exercises in a web-based context? The second question was, whether are these personal resources meaningful in a sense that we're just protecting psychological well-being? And so we were asking whether these resources are meaningful in relation to resilient behavior and also psychological well-being. We also had some intervention studies. In our first study, we had about 500 employees participating in this web-based training. We also had a study design that just consisted of a longitudinal study design with 6 measurement points. In between the first 4 points, we had the training administered, and also the order of the training courses was randomized, so we had a kind of implicit weighting groups here. And also to the measurement points, we had different measures, so it were standardized measures we were using, and we also just analyzed everything with multi-level models for change. And the results are as follows. So we had linear effects of time for mindfulness, just increasing, for self-efficacy, and also for optimism. So here we see an increase in personal resources, and we can also just test it whether these were to the specific courses, and this was the case for self-efficacy and optimism. So we could just see, as the persons participated in these courses, their respective resource increased. Okay. What about well-being? So we also saw an increase of resilient behavior in time. Also, psychological detachment increased, emotional exhaustion decreased, and also work engagement increased. And again, as we were just in a longitudinal design, we can just see that a change in personal resources led to a change in resilient behavior, and a change in resilient behavior just led to a change in psychological well-being. So we're just differentiating within and between subject effects here. Okay, so these are the results and effect sizes. So we also see here that our conceptual model got verified. From our studies, we know also that we had an effect on mindfulness, but this effect just evolves with time. It just takes more time, and it's not an immediate effect as tested here. Okay. Okay, so we can just say that this web-based training was successful in enhancing these personal resources, and that these personal resources of resilience were also important in increasing psychological well-being. Okay. We also had another starting point, and it was about enhancing resilient behavior. So we also just defined, or just had a kind of web-based training meant to increase these 4 facets of resilient behavior. And the training just looked like this. So we also had different, I think, formulas, and it was a kind of psycho-educative thing, but we also had different exercises in order to fulfill these ideas of these facets. And it just looked like this. I'm not going very deep into this, but we also had a kind of, I think, schemes they can just use if they encounter a problem, and just how to think, how can I plan just to get over this stressful event. Yeah. And also the results were interesting. So due to this training, we also had 6 measurement points, and so an increase in resilient behavior and also an increase in psychological detachment. And we also saw a kind of increase in work engagement, and also emotional exhaustion just went down. So here with resilient behavior, we have another starting point for increasing resilience and ensuring psychological well-being. And I was also in companies and just offered workshops on resilient behaviors. And these workshops just started with a kind of assessment of resilient behavior. So I was using here an own platform. So the assessment looked like this. So I just showed a QR code to the participants. They just filled out a questionnaire. And in the end, they just got the results, and also we got the results for the group in there. So the idea of this assessment is we're just creating a common language about what can resilient behavior be. And the effect is if you just encounter a problematic situation, you don't have to pose one big question of what should I do now? But with these 4 facets, you're just posing 4 specific questions about how can I cope with my own effective reactions. Yeah. So you can be more specific. And in the end, we were just talking about specific coping strategies with the persons. And in the end, we were just collecting different strategies, and also had a kind of toolbox, and were inspiring each other with these different strategies. And it was interesting because with teams, they just encounter the same problems, but have very different strategies for coping with these problems. And by an exchange on these strategies, they just got an idea and inspired by each other. Okay, so now I'm going just to broaden the view to the workplace and say, if you're just talking about resilience, so far I was talking about individual resilience, but in the work context, you're also just connected with others into teams. So we also can talk about team resilience, and we can also talk about the resilience of an organization as a whole. Yeah. And I also had a conceptual model on this, and I just presented you. Individual resilience is about you're having personal resources, and these personal resources just lead to resilient behavior, and resilient behavior in turn just enhances psychological well-being and performance. I'm having a quite similar concept on team resilience. So teams having good resources like a good team climate or psychological safety, leading to resilient behavior of teams, and this behavior just ensures a well-being of team members. I'm also having a kind of common, could just draw a third part for organizational resilience, but this is not the case. Yeah. But let me explain you, because I'm having a more perspective from organizational psychology and organizational behavior, and I think the cartoon here just explains it quite well. It's in German, but I introduce it to you. You're seeing here 2 teams in 2 boxes. The left-hand box are chickens for being beloved and for cuddling, €1.50 per piece. And on the right side, you're having shark food. Yeah. So now just imagine what of these teams would have a nicer or a harder time? Yeah, so the chicken on the right side with shark food, yeah, I think it's gonna be hard times for them. So in the end, it depends on the box you're sitting in, and you have to sit in the right box here. And from my opinion, an organization is also like a box, yeah. And so the organizational resilience is all the collection of these organizational resources and processes that just enable you just to behave resilient. And it's all the surroundings. So it's more about job conditions and the conditions you're just working in. And also these resources are interacting with each other. So we have this model. We also tested this model in these interactions of personal and organizational resources, also leading to resilient behavior. So, for example, we were just looking on also having samples with employees, and the results were, again, the resource like self-efficacy just has an influence on well-being by means of resilient behavior. So we're seeing indirect effects here. And we also see some moderating effects here. So we're having decision latitude here as a kind of aspect of organizational resilience. And I'm having some diagrams on the next slide just to illustrate these effects. So on the left side, you just see the relationship between self-efficacy and resilient behavior. And the relationship is positive. As self-efficacy increases, resilient behavior also increases, okay? And in case of high decision latitude, so if you have a high autonomy at your workplace, this effect is even stronger, the relationship between self-efficacy and resilient behavior. So autonomy or decision latitude is a kind of booster for your personal resources, okay? But we are also having very, I think, interesting things of other resources. So here you see the relationship between mindfulness and resilient behavior. And if on the blue line, if decision latitude is high, everything is fine, you're having a high resilient behavior, and mindfulness has no effect. But mindfulness has an effect in case of low decision latitude. So here you can just compensate with increasing mindfulness in terms of resilient behavior. So mindfulness has a kind of buffering function here and just compensating low decision latitude. So in my opinion, these are just interesting results of showing that the interaction of personal and organizational resources are just very different in nature of what you're talking about, having a booster function or having also a kind of compensating function. Okay. So I show you to the end also some recent results. So we were also looking on work intensity as a stressor at work. And I think you know work intensity of just having some tasks to do with this post-its here, or having even more to do, more and just more and more tasks having to do with it. Yeah, so this could be a work intensity of having a lot of things to do, high amount of tasks and very little time and tight deadlines you have to do with it. Yeah. So but it's not only these working at a high amount of tasks to tight deadlines, but work intensity could also have different aspects like being interrupted frequently, also having high interdependence with other workers and tasks and just waiting for them just to complete their tasks, or also having, or we are also talking about extended availability. Yeah, so if private life and working life are just blending together, and you're just getting work calls as you're just at home. Okay, so we were just looking on how does resilient behavior just relate to the effects of work intensity. And as you can just imagine, a high work intensity would have a kind of negative effect on psychological well-being. And so we saw here with a recent study that got just published I think some weeks ago. So we see here the relationship between work intensity and psychosomatic complaints. And here you see if resilient behavior is low, higher work intensity just leads to more psychosomatic complaints. And in case of high resilient behavior, the slope isn't that steep. Yeah. So here we're having a kind of buffering effect of resilient behavior, just buffering the negative effects of a high work intensity. And this effect seems to be quite stable. We also have another sample with supervisors here. And here you see the relationship between work intensity and emotional exhaustion. And in case of high resilient behavior, this is the solid line, you also see this buffering effect of resilient behavior. Undercutting or cutting this effect of work intensity on emotional exhaustion. Okay. So you see, these are just results on how can we enhance resilience, either as a kind of personal resource, or how can we enhance resilient behavior. I presented you some aspects and workshops how to work with that. And we also see that this resilient behavior is just important in ensuring psychological well-being. Yeah. Okay, so in the end, I have to say no chicken got harmed. Yeah, everything was fine. All the chicken are fine and in best condition. Yeah. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm interested in your questions right now. Thanks a lot.